Here's more at Andy Herman NFL and at Pack-A-Day Podcast. That's who joins us now on the Wisconsin Sports Radio Network guest hotline, powered by Gruber Law. One call, that's all. Damn it, Andy, I lost a bet. I thought for sure you'd be in a costume.
No costume this year. So I am hosting. Well, I should rephrase this. My son is hosting a party for sixth graders tonight at tomorrow night at my house. So I just get to be the chaperone. I don't have any Halloween party or anything like that. So yeah, no costume this year.
Everyone that saw the helmet that you brought out for what is now going to be Victory Helmet Monday.
I was going to say, that's different. It's Victory Monday.
Right. So it wasn't just like throwing, but I think that because you were willing to put the helmet on, people, specifically Trevor, went, 100%, he's going to have a costume. I said, he might. I don't know, I haven't go 100%, though.
If I had one, I certainly would have wore it. No question. But yeah, no costume this year. And then we do have kind of like some backup costumes, but my kiddo was sleeping in his room and I didn't want to go and mess through the bucket of stuff. So it's a no costume today.
Wake up. I got to put a costume on.
My son had a sleepover last night. They were crashing on the couch when I got up this morning at 4 a.m. and I walked out there. And he's like, Dad, what are you doing? I'm like, bro, going to work. Oh, sorry. Idiot. All right.
Classic.
Packers, help me. Tell me I should not be afraid that Quay Walker is apparently injured. That is a huge deal for the Packers. What do we need to know?
What?
Yeah, a couple things. The first reason you should be. What's that?
No. Josh? Is this what? No. Like he's
Okay.
like injured to where he's like out? Like
Andy, bring the boy up to speed, would you please?
First of all, Ryan Rollins had a huge night last night, Josh. So that happened. The Brewers lost in the NLCS a couple weeks ago.
I was aware of that. Yes. What else?
The Bucks are 4-1. No, just
You're seeing Indiana Jones.
Yeah, Quay Walker was added to the injury report yesterday. Did not practice, calf injury. So we'll have to kind of take a look at whether or not he practices today, whether he's good to go. I'm sure Matt LaFleur will be very forthcoming with the injury report today and tell us exactly who's. But yeah, we'll get that injury report later today. But anytime you see calf, obviously it's a little bit concerning. Jacobs had that calf flare up on a Friday and still played in the game, so not necessarily a foregone conclusion that he'll be out for this game, but so definitely something to monitor. So a couple things. The first thing I would say is that the best news is that you're playing the Carolina Panthers at home, and there should be an opportunity to win that game no matter what. The second thing I would say is, very quietly, Isaiah McDuffie has had a very nice season. He did have his worst game probably against Pittsburgh this last week, but prior to that was playing actually really good football, and I've been really impressed with him. He knows the defense. He can call the plays. He can play the mic, and he should be at minimum serviceable alongside Edgerrin Cooper at that middle linebacker and Mike spot. And again, just having somebody that can wear that green dot and be able to call the entire defense is super important as well. And then the other thing I'll add is, in very limited playing time, Tyron Hopper has also played well and can fill in that Isaiah McDuffie spot. He had one play last week and broke up the 2-point conversion on that play, which Jeff Hafley talked about yesterday. So solid depth at the position. I wouldn't go into this game with McDuffie, Cooper, and Hopper and say, wow, they just don't have the linebackers. I think most years that would probably be one of the Packers' best linebacking groups, to be honest. But thankfully, they do have Quay overall. But if he's out this week, I think they can survive it.
Yeah, okay. So that was my concern. I had seen the injury report, but I thought there was like news that he was out. Like that.
Not yet.
Well, it was a DNP yesterday.
Yeah, yeah, but it's that was Thursday. They don't play till Sunday. Okay, yeah.
Thanks, McFly.
Well, I'm just saying, like, you scared me a little bit. I do need to talk, Andy, about what you just said about the good news being they're playing the Panthers, and sounds to me like you're not afraid of this being a trap game at all.
I'm not. Neither is the Potawatomi Sportsbook, who has them as 13.5-point favorites. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. We've seen Green Bay against Cleveland, have that big issue before. I talked about this with your colleagues, Mitch and who else was on with Mitch this week? Oh, Tommy earlier this week. But I went back and I looked. I actually did research, guys. This is crazy. I went back and looked at teams who have lost by 30 plus points the week prior, which the Panthers did this past week. They lost by 31 to Buffalo, and to see what that kind of means for them the following week. And they actually went 3-3. The 6 teams that have lost by 30 plus points went 3-3 the following week. So basically 500. Well, not basically, actually 500. And then the other thing that I'll note is that they improved their point differential by over 30 points per game in those 6 games. So if you lost by 35, they would only lose by 5 the next week, for example. So it usually has served as a wake-up call for that team that has lost by 30 plus points. So definitely a little bit something to keep an eye on. And again, Green Bay's definitely kept, played a little bit down to their opponent so far when they've had these type of games. Here's what I'll say. If we are talking on Monday, guys, and the Packers win this game by 4 points or 6 points, and it's kind of annoying, I'm not gonna be bummed or apologize for anything like that. If you said right now, Andy, you can guarantee the Packers win by 6 points, I would say sign me up. I will gladly take the 6 point win. But what I would like to see from this team at some point, really great teams that are Super Bowl bound, teams that win the Super Bowl, handle some opponents with ease, blow out a team or two along the way. It doesn't necessarily have to be this week. It could be against Philly next week. That'd be great. I would love if it was against Philly next week, right? So it doesn't have to be this week. And that's why, again, I'm not going to apologize for it. But this is a good opportunity to put one of those games on the board. They don't have many left. I think the 2 Minnesota games, maybe Chicago at home, maybe New York on the road, maybe a couple of those could be those type of games. But this has the feel of one of those that you should just go out and dominate. And I would like to see this team at some point in time, whether it's this game or a couple other ones down the road, just say, you know what? We're just this much better than you, and we're going to show you for 4 quarters and dominate a game. So am I afraid of it? No. Do I think they're going to win it no matter what? Yes. But I'm even raising the bar. I would like this to be one where they just go out and say, we're just way better than you.
Andy, if that happens and we are just way better than them, and this is a completely lopsided game in the Packers' favor, can we all agree then that this actually is a really good football team, or are we always going to be hedging our bets with the Green Bay Packers, much like we do with the Milwaukee Brewers?
Yeah, I think we are a sports fan base that for the most part is a little bit shattered inside, despite having, at least in my lifetime, 2 Super Bowls and an NBA championship. And don't forget an NBA Cup last year. I will have everyone remember NBA Cup as well. So, but I think just so many playoff disappointments and so many just heartbreaking playoff losses. We don't have to go too far, but I know it wasn't like a Game 7 loss against the Dodgers, but you have high hopes going into that series and you lose in 4 games. So it's especially after that season, that stuff just stings after a while. And I think when you have a new era, a new regime, etc., there's always going to be that little cloud over the head until you went out. For Brian Gutekunst, for Matt LaFleur, for Jordan Love, for basically everyone on this team, there's always going to be a little bit of that asterisk or that little bit of that cloud of like, just can they win the big one? Can they ultimately win the Super Bowl? So I think there's always going to be a little of that. I think some of the stuff so far has been extremely like any of the fire Matt stuff or anything like that is insane and completely undeserved. But there's always going to be the doubt or the questions until this team ultimately goes and wins a championship. So this team is going to be judged on their playoff. I'm not even saying they necessarily have to win a Super Bowl to get it if they have an awesome playoff run and whatever. But that's going to be, I think, the big question that this team ultimately has to answer over the next few years.
Yeah, Andy, I think to your point, this where the fan base is at right now with this Packers team is they're judging them a little bit more because of how they started and because of what's happened since. And we've talked about it week in and week out about their identity, blah, blah, blah. But they've played to their opponent. And that's been the thing. And that's what you're looking for a change from. This Sunday is the opportunity for this Packers team to play their level, what that we know they can play, and just completely boat race this Carolina Panthers team. If they don't, even if they win, if they don't, and they play to their level and beat them by 3 or 6, we'll be happy they won, but it's going to bring back all those questions of, okay, how do you go and play as well as you did the week before and then only beat the Panthers by 6? Like, how does that happen? And I think that adds to the stress level too of Packers fans of just keeping every game close.
It does. One of the kind of unique / fun things of being able to do what I do is, I can see where my views and my podcast downloads are based on like what's happening in the Packers land, and like the Lions and Commanders and the Steelers wins are huge spikes. Like everyone can't get enough Packers content and information, right? You can see it. And after, of course, like a Browns loss, it's like complete, like, I don't want to even think about this team until the next Packers game. You see a huge dip, or even after the tie to Dallas. But interestingly enough, of this year, even after like the wins against the Bengals that were, it was like a barely win, and the win against the Cardinals, it almost had like a loss type numbers this year of like, you know what, they're not playing the way that I want. I don't necessarily want to listen to it. And then you get the win against the Steelers and it spikes right back up this week. So it's just kind of, you almost get like the pulse of the fan base based on that. And you can see it. You can see that this, fan base has high expectations for the team, understandably so. I think one of the things that just, clouds the view a little bit is when you, of course, and they're not going to call it this, but when you make an all-in move for Micah Parsons right before the season, and then when you go and you really beat down the Detroit Lions in week 1, we're now seeing everything through that lens of like, that's what this team is capable of. Or if like maybe there would have been, the first week would have been, that 4-point win against Arizona, and then a 9-point win against Cincinnati, and then you beat Washington, and then you boat race Detroit or something like that. Like, it probably feels a little bit different, but when you have that immediate satisfaction, now everything is viewed through that lens. So it's probably a blessing and a curse all in one. But yeah, again, I go back to, I want to see this team just take out an opponent the way that we know they're capable of. And this seems like a great week to do it.
Andy Herman, the Pack a Day podcast. Follow him on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. And of course, the podcast at Pack a Day Podcast. You brought him up, Micah Parsons. Andy, is he playing the way that you expected him to play? Because some people think so. He just won NFC Defensive Player of the Month.
Is that
what
good?
Say you?
I would actually disagree. He's playing far better than I expected him to, which is saying something, because I had extremely high expectations for him coming in. But, listen, we've seen teams make these type of deals. And, I mean, Dame is a semi-example in Milwaukee, where you get so excited about this superstar player coming to your team. And this is not a knock on Dame, who I think did everything he could. It just wasn't a fit, right? It just wasn't the right fit with the right player. It just never gelled together, despite that NBA Cup, the way that you would have liked it to have gelled. So you always have those high hopes of what it's going to look like, but you're never quite sure until it actually happens, and until you see it there. And I think he's playing better than he's ever played in his career right now, which is saying something. I went back and watched every snap of his in Dallas last year, which is really, really good. But I even have it far better this year than what I could have possibly expected. So his impact is immeasurable. It's, even the play along the defensive line of guys like Devontae Wyatt, Rashawn Gary, LVN, Colby Wooden is buoyed by the fact that, Mike is taking all of that pressure and all that presence away from some of those players. And it's just lifting the entirety of the defense. And I think hopefully if we can start seeing some of these corners play a little bit better as well, and this defense kind of gels together, you're going to start seeing him even have a bigger impact, because hopefully some of the coverage tightens up on the back end, which allows him, because he's like a quarter of a second away from like 6 or 7 more sacks. So if he just gets a little bit more of that time to get to the quarterback, we could see him wreck shop even more.
Andy, yesterday on the show, Goody joined us, and we were talking to him, and we didn't ask him the hardcore media questions, because we knew like that wasn't the interview we were doing. We knew he wasn't going to talk about it. A lot of people wanted us to talk about Nate Hobbs. I'll talk about Nate Hobbs with you. And I'm just curious. Okay, so this is a free agent signing, bring him in, then he gets benched. Matt Schneidman had a story about how this was a sign that the Packers were focused on winning now and putting kind of the egos aside. Where do you see this whole dynamic going? Do you think that this is going to be a permanent thing? Is he kind of essentially riding the bench for the majority of the snaps the rest of the way here?
Yeah, I thought Jeff Hafley did a good job of kind of talking about this yesterday, and I felt the same way. Of this is a very Green Bay thing, and they're going to continue to have a competition at that position. And as Jeff Hafley said yesterday, we have not seen the last of Nate Hobbs. He said this is not a, what did he say? He didn't say like, it wasn't like a benching. It was just, again, more of like a competition, or again, it was, I don't want to get the exact words wrong here, but you can very clearly tell that there is still going to be a role for Nate Hobbs here down the line. And I think even in this last game, we saw in some obvious passing situations in nickel, he came in and played the obvious passing. There was only 2 or 3 of those, I think 3 situations in the game where he played, but it was obvious passing situations where they took Javon Bullard off the field and put Nate Hobbs in the nickel, which was one of my expectations for this team all along. When they got him and the way they had Carrington, I said, my guess is Nate Hobbs and Keyshawn Nixon are going to be your base corners on the outside, because you don't want Carrington out there too much because he's not a great tackler on base downs. I said on your nickel defense where it's 1st and 10, 2nd and 5, 3rd and 3, where run and pass are still an option, I said, I bet you get Hobbs and Nixon on the outside with Bullard still in the slot. And then in your nickel situations where it's obvious pass, you bring in Carrington Valentine, you put him as the outside corner, you have Nixon as the other, and then you have Hobbs in the slot, because you don't want Bullard, and even especially if you're going to go any man-to-man coverage in those 3rd and 13s or whatever, where you clearly know they're going to pass, or maybe in the second half where the other team is down by 17 points and it's just pass. Get your best coverage guys on the field. And to me, Hobbs is an upgrade over Bullard as a pure coverage guy in the slot. We saw a few plays of that this past week. I think that could continue to be the case, even if it's Valentine and Nixon as your primary corners, even on base, and then nickel and it's Bullard in the slot. In those obvious passing downs, it still feels like there's a role for him. In any dime downs, there's definitely going to be a role for him. And I have a feeling that this is going to be a continued competition. And it should be noted as well that Matt LaFleur this week said that this is a competition for these corners, including Keyshawn Nixon. And Justice Mosqueda, when I talked to him, pointed out this week that on the final 2-point conversion play, right before the end of the game, basically, Keyshawn Nixon was off the field. Now, we don't know if that was a long drive where they were on the field a lot. We don't know if he just got tired. Maybe he got a little bit banged up. Maybe he needed a sub, or maybe it was that he got pulled out of the game in an obvious passing situation and they wanted to go with somebody else. And maybe that is going to be a competition. So I have a feeling that this is just beginning to heat up. Carrington Valentine did everything he could to now earn that spot at outside corner, but we could see some really interesting stuff now at corner with all 3 of these guys competing.
One more for Andy Herman on the Nicolay Law Fan Talking text line, 414-677-1250. Can y'all ask Andy if he thinks Goody's going to make a move by Thursday? Cornerback, defensive tackle, what do you think?
Yeah, I would put it at about 20% chance. I think there's the 80% likelihood that there's not a trade for Green Bay. I'll also just add really quick, I think if we're, as Packers fans right now, we want a very, very quiet trade deadline, because I think if there are teams that are going to make a big move, you're probably looking at maybe Detroit for a pass rusher. Maybe San Fran continues to try to fill in for Fred Warner and Nick Bosa. The Rams are apt to go all in. They already acquired a corner. We could see some of these teams. Philly will always go all in if they get the opportunity. So, that's always on the table. If there is a big move, my guess is it's probably for one of the competitors in the NFC, in a very tough NFC, and Green Bay already made their big move. So I'm kind of hoping for a quieter trade deadline. If Green Bay does, you hit the nail on the head. I think they're probably looking at a corner. I think if you're looking at real pie in the sky thinking, I think Denzel Ward from Cleveland would be probably one of your best opportunities coming off join him. They need to start getting some draft picks in Cleveland, and they're going to be tight against the cap with all the Deshaun Watson situation anyway. So it probably makes some sense for Cleveland. But for Green Bay, my guess is if it's something, it's probably something small, rotational defensive tackle, a backup corner, just for some depth and competition. I wouldn't expect too much, but I've been pleasantly surprised in the past, including deals for Micah Parsons. So we'll see what they end up doing.
Andy Herman, the Pack a Day Podcast. Follow him on Twitter at Andy Herman NFL. Andy, when we're done with this interview, which is now, text me your address. I am Amazoning something to you just in case.
Here we go.
I am not jinxing the Packers, but if we're going to have Victory Monday fun with Andy, he's got to have the things. He's got to have the things ready.
Yep. So I appreciate that.
I'm on you. Do not open this until it is a Victory Monday, and then I'm going to give you a heads up. You're going to have to back up off of your camera just a little bit for this to continue on.
Yep.
Andy Herman, the Pack a Day Podcast. We appreciate you, buddy. Go Pack Go. We'll talk to you Monday.